So I've cut out 2 squares of fabric here that I'm going to sew together, and I'm going to sew a 1 centimeter seam down to my point and turn and go across. And I'm going to sew this in the normal way without doing the secret tip, so that you can see the difference in the point when it's turned through with the regular method and the method that I'm going to teach you. So I'm just going to start at the top with a 1 centimeter seam. I'm not going to back stitch because it's just a demonstration. So my needle is down, I've got a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I'm just going to sew to my point. Now I'm just going to stop at my point. When I get there, I do like to use the hand wheel on a point, lift my foot and turn, put my foot back down and sew. So this is just how you would normally sew down into a point and turn. So here is the point that I've just sewn, and when I'm turning through my corners, I do like to snip in a diagonal, which helps me turn it through. Some people do snip across here and like that, but me personally, I always snip in this angle. So I'm just going to do that with this piece, and I'm going to go about 2 millimeters close to my stitch line and try and turn this through and see if I get a point. So I put my thumb in, and already it's hard to get into. So let's see if I can get this to be a point. The best thing that I always find to do is to fold my seam allowance in like that, because when it is turned through, these 2 seam allowance edges will meet and be flush. So I'm just going to try and get a point now and see what happens when I turn it through. Yeah, just as I thought, what happens is you get the lump. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. You don't get a point. What some of you might find that you end up doing is getting a pencil or something to poke through. Sometimes it exposes the threads along your stitch line, and it's just not very flattering. Sometimes that poke can come out and it's just not a perfect point. So now I'm going to show you how to sew the perfect point. So again, I'm going to start at the top. I'm not going to bother to back stitch. I'm just going to go down, and then I'm going to show you what to do. So I've got my fabric and my needles down, and what I like to do is take a pencil and mark the point where I would turn the corner. So I'm going to just mark here, which is 1 centimeter in and 1 centimeter across, right there. And then I'm going to sew straight down to 1 stitch before that dot. So as I come closer, I will use the hand wheel so that I don't go over the dot. Right, so now my needle is down, I'm going to lift up my foot, turn my fabric 45 degrees so that it's in a diagonal, put my foot back down and do 1 stitch with the hand wheel. 1 stitch across. Then I'm going to lift my foot again, turn it the other 45 degrees so that I can go across, and put my foot back down and just continue sewing. So what you can see now is that I've got a nice straight line going across 1 stitch. Wasn't the most accurate, I missed the point. And it's this straight diagonal stitch that is going to give you the point. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before, snip across my seam allowance, and that's going to follow the same angle as that stitch. And then I'm going to turn it through and see if we get a point. Folding over my seam allowance just as I did before, then I can turn that through. And look, already you can see that we have a point. So this is the one that we did before without a point, and this is one that I've just turned through, and it has a nice pointed right angle. So I'm going to take this over to the iron and just press these seams nice and flat so that you can see how sharp this looks versus this one. I'm going to iron them both. So here they are both pressed, and you can see the difference. This is a nice 90-degree angle, and this just has that curve to it. It's not pointed. It does kind of bunch up a little bit in the corner versus this one, which is just perfectly point and crisp. And I've also demonstrated here on 2 pocket flaps This is the one which is just sewn regularly without going in a diagonal across. And as you can see, this bit is curved. It hasn't turned through very well. This angle here is usually quite easy to get into a point whether you do the stitch across or not, because the angle isn't very acute, so it's quite easy to turn this angle through. But here, again, as you can see, it's rounded off instead of turning through into a nice point. And this is the one that I did with my straight stitch going across in an angle. I've got a nice corner here, a nice point here, and a nice point here. So you can see that it really does work, guys, for any point or corner that you have. Doing that one stitch across is all the difference to a nice crisp corner or a rounded, ugly corner. So that was the tutorial, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a new trick and technique that you can use now to sew your points. Some of you might have already seen this and like this is old news, but for some of you who aren't experienced sewers, this is a really, really useful tip for how to sew your corners and points, and you shouldn't struggle anymore with turning them through. Anyway, I'll see you in the next tutorial, guys. Bye.